Okay, good stuff. All right. Well, I can see the numbers starting to tick up, and we've hit 10 past. So, yeah, a very warm welcome, everyone, to this our opening presentation of the day, and a very warm welcome to Anup and Peter Klee, the authors of Enterprise Architecture with SAP. So, yeah, really looking forward to this session. I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Let's just maybe introduce ourselves very quickly. I think I'm Peter Klee. I'm heading the SAP Transformation Hub. We are in the service organization of SAP, so we are working on enterprise architecture with our customers. But I was long in enterprise architecture, even half of my career on the customer side as well. So I bring both to that mix, and we're happy to have a session with you together. So Anup, maybe quickly to you.
Sure. Thank you, Peter. Thanks, Philip. My name is Anup Das. I'm based out of Newtown Square office in SAP headquarters in Philadelphia. I have like 25 years of professional experience, last 17 years in SAP. And from last 7 years, I'm exclusively focusing on enterprise architecture for our SAP customers. Thank you.
Okay. So, Anup, can you progress?
Yep. I mean, this is agenda slide, Peter.
Okay, the agenda slide. So I think that just a few items which we're going to go through, right? So one is about motivation. Well, I think everyone has many motivations, but I think we see this enterprise architecture as part of our transformation needs, etc. So there's some special grounding for that one. And then I think even though we have always the book to the left, I think it's who should read this book, or who should care about enterprise architecture. We also give a little bit of an insight to the book, so how to read through the book, not that because we think there's special approaches how to get familiar with the topic if you're not already familiar with the topic. And even if you're familiar with the topic, you might address it in a certain different order again. We also give a quick introduction to the architecture framework of SAP, because there are some specific unique attributes we believe which make it different, even though it's very similar to what you know from the TOGAF. And then Anup will, in the second pass, even though it's only the last item here, talk about a virtual customer example about mergers and acquisitions, so that you see some of the theory we will go through in the beginning live. Okay, so why I think addressing strategic transformation needs, okay, well, everyone is asking for holistic guidance on transformation. And I think the areas we see, it's in three areas. So one is really business is changing. It could be because of external event on supply chains, etc. Okay. So I think it's this react to business change and adoption. The second part is about innovation. So that is mainly more technology driven, or being able to use AI. So I think it's being able to be more efficient, realize value from your data. All these things are not new. They have been there as well, but often they come now in combination of these business change and business needs. And the last pillar, the third one is, okay, well, ideally you can adopt quickly, you can adopt your innovation areas easily. But often what hinders customers to do so, or companies to do so, is the complexity and the obsolescence from the past. For sure, also innovations comes always with new areas. So I think different stakeholders of the C-suite, in the CIO, CFO, at the bottom, chief digital officer, technical officer in the innovation part, or for business change, chief operating officer and CEOs would be key stakeholders for these change drivers. And on the right-hand side, if you now want to manage all these changes, you need to take an active action as well. And enterprise architecture could be a mechanism to that one, but it's not only enterprise architecture, I think, and that is when we talk about the integration of enterprise architecture into the overall transformation management, then we might talk a chief transformation officer, chief digital officer who takes care of architecture, but also value, change management skills, and all the different other elements. So this gives a bit of a frame where we see the different change drivers, and typically companies are enacting in all four of them at the same time. On the next slide, now we think, okay, about who should care about enterprise architecture? The architects, that's for sure. But for sure, we here are in the audience of SAP. So SAP and enterprise architects, that is not that natural of a marriage, because often SAP professionals don't care about architecture, and enterprise architects don't care about professionals. And then by that, I think the intersection of these two bubbles is small. We believe it should be larger, and it should also include the C-levels. Typically, you might be at the intersection between SAPs and architectures. Our motivation of writing the book is that I think we have more overlap, because we want to bring SAP specifics of architecture to the enterprise architects, and we want to bring enterprise architecture practices to people in the SAP ecosystem who do not care that much about enterprise architecture so far. But if you think broader, then the next expansion is, okay, there's also PMO, project management office, or transformation office, TO, process owners, technologies, data offices. Often these are practices in companies, either in isolation or in overlap. And I think our picture to enterprise architecture is, yeah, there's a lot in common. Therefore, these practices need to work together. And you can spill in one further. And then we are with the finance, corporate strategy, procurement departments, etc. You could argue, what have these in common with enterprise architecture? Well, if you want to fight the shadow IT, then procurement is in the middle of it. If you want to reduce your TCO, then you work with finance. Well, an enterprise architecture should follow a corporate strategy. So therefore, you have a lot of different functions, and therefore enterprise architecture can't be in the ivory tower. It should be rather an intrinsic integrated practice. So that is the motivation of this picture. Let's continue and give you some thoughts on how we address the topic in the book, right? So that's a bit of a, I wouldn't say just a table of contents of the book, but for sure when we said, okay, what is the grounding, the foundation is that we talk about the introduction. That's more or less what we're doing now here in the very short slot. And then we talk about the framework. We also will do this one. The chapter 3 is what I talked before already. I think that is the integration of all the different functions. And we have a generic chapter on tools. The part 2 is about the specific examples, the specific use cases. And not all of them are very specific with SAP, but many we see in our engagement with the customers. And Anup later will give a bit of a highlight on chapter 8 on mergers and acquisitions. So if you would be interested in the book and you want to see enterprise architecture in practice, then you might read the framework, and then you can deep dive heavily into this part 2, where a lot of these practical examples are explained. And so that is the blue line. But we also continue in part 3 more on the tool basis. And I think while writing the book, the acquisition of LeanX came into the mix, so we need to rewrite a bit. But I think, therefore, we also have an introduction to LeanX. And that is another, now the orange line, if you click one more, will give an overview of LeanX. You should also first maybe then experience the generic tool chapter from part 1. But then the orange line would give a bit of a flavor of what LeanX is. I see probably many of you already use LeanX. For sure, LeanX will also evolve, but I think it's giving at least a foundation why tooling is a good element and needed for many of these architecture works. The next thing is practice, and that's very close to our heart as well. So when we talked about the different audiences and how they need to work together, so setting up an enterprise architecture practice is combining tools, methodologies, etc., etc. So therefore, this chapter 15 gives you that background, and in chapter 16 we also talk about, well, what different enterprise architecture practices we have at SAP, because we as well are a normal company. So we have an internal enterprise architecture team. we have development, they need to think about, well, the architecture of our products, and we in consulting care about the enterprise architecture of our customers. And we have a couple of other areas as well. So therefore, that's giving a bit of an insider look into SAP. So that is the golden line of enterprise architecture practices. To do that, you should still start with the framework and maybe again the discussion of all these different functions working together. Last but not least, we also give an outlook of the next big things. Okay, they could be probably rewritten every 12 months or every 6 months with the dynamics on AI and whatnot. And we end up with a conclusion in the summary. And the purple line, I think it's a little bit of a highlight of special chapters in the book. So for those who are already SAP enterprise architects since many years, might find, okay, well, I know a lot, but I think maybe the purple line will then the most exciting, thrilling line for you, looking into something special. What chapters of the examples you take from the blue part 2, maybe up to you. Okay, let's continue and give a bit of an introduction to the SAP Enterprise Architecture Framework. So we have 5 dimensions, right? So methodology, the content, the tooling, the practice, and the services. What is so important, and click once more, I think, is that they all build on top of each other. So we build reference content following a certain methodology, being, let's say, represented in tooling. And in our services, we use in the methodology and the content and the tooling. And with that, we might even help to build practices as customers, or we are an own practice. Or from a practice perspective, you can also think about, well, I need methodology, content, and tooling. I might even internally, as a customer, as a company, offer my enterprise architecture work as a service to the rest of the organization. So that is also a perspective to take, right? And the tooling alone, without a methodology, without the content, and without the practice, would also not be worth anything. I know that there's a lot of promotion, even from SAP or integrated tool chain, but I think without all the other dimensions, it wouldn't worth be anything. Let's go and look now maybe one by one. First, on the methodology side, I think this is, if you know TOGAF, you will also find your way throughout the methodology of the SAP Enterprise Architecture framework. So we have the different domains and we have a clear meta model. So I think this is, I will not dig deeper much. More distinct is our reference content. There we have capability and process models of different level of depths and different industries for the entire customer base. Okay, we are still refining some of them. We also add the data dimension, for example, which is not available. And we expose this content in the integrated tool chain, where we have the collaboration between primarily Signavio and LeanX, but also Cloud ALM for implementing the architecture is relevant as well. And as I said before, and you will see this in the later example that Anup will talk about the services, we have built our services according to the methodology and have a pretty modular approach, so that I think you can pick and choose and we can define what is needed. And practice, just a little bubble on top, I think. So practices that you can still configure if you want to build up your practice. Okay, what is your tool set? Okay, what is the relevant content for you? You can extend the methodology. The adaptability is there, as in TOGAF is there as well. But I think it's much more prescriptive and pre-thought through. So the next is just an example of very specific artifacts which are part of the methodology. And you might see some in Anup's example. I don't want to read through those. And we're also evolving those as well. Important for us is that the governance section, which is also part of TOGAF, so therefore nothing new, is for us very essential. So that I think we are not only happy with a nice drawing, but I think we have it. We start from the requirements with risk assessments and whatnot, decision catalogs and whatnot. And most of them, even decision catalogs, are also supported by LeanX. And we now have the the nice fact that I think with Linux as part of the SAP family, now we can evolve our methodology and talk then together with the tool vendor, us, on the other side, so that we can expand the capabilities of our methodology and the tooling and the reference content in conjunction. That is what I gave as a quick intro, and over to you, Anup, then to talk through your example.
Sure. Thank you, Peter. So I hope by now you got a good context on what was the motivation to write this enterprise architecture with SAP book. Also, the bit glimpse on how all the chapters is laid out. We kind of thought this through to give this metro map or reading map on considering where you are in your stage of career for enterprise architecture, right? So we have something for everybody in this book. That was what our intent was, right? So now coming to this specific chapter or part called part 2, where we have laid down the practical experiences of 3 of us into different use cases, which we thought is relevant for our customers today, right? So we have used the similar structure for each of these use cases, 6 use cases, what you see here. We have used the frame of what is the business and IT context of this use case, right? So if you talk about cloud transformation, business transformation, sustainability, what is the business and the IT context? Because that's the first thing which we start off when we design the target architecture and roadmap, or when we design the North Star, or where during the transformation planning exercise, this is the first thing which we have to understand: why they are transforming, what are the reasons, right? What are the drivers? And that drivers could be the priorities, could be from business side or IT side. So that's why we wanted to give a little bit of context on what is our experience across all these use cases from a business and IT context. And then what's the problem statement? This is very, very important, because the problem statement, what you see in the book, I'm sure many people will relate to that, but at the same time, many people may see a different problem statement for the same use case, because even with our experience of so many years in addressing strategic customers transformation planning, we see every customer where we get in, we see something different, something unique, something different starting point for every customer. That's why you also see what Peter explained. This enterprise architecture framework helps us to bring some method to madness in terms of how complex every customer's landscape is, right? So that helps us to keep us grounded and look at from a lens where we can also find some pattern on of all these use cases and starting points. So that's why in this book you will see a problem statement explained, and then based on that problem statement, we are also showing in this book how to apply this EA transformation approach, how to apply this enterprise architecture framework. That's the third point. And then, of course, we do it to reach an outcome, right? To reach the end goal of this of the architecture exercise. That's why we are very particular about what is the deliverable, what is the outcome. You will see different words, even though if you see the slide which Peter showed, there are different work. Some books they say different work products, and they say different deliverables or outcome. But at the end of the day, when you're starting something to solve, you need to reach a goal, right? So that's the fourth one. And last, we also summarized each of these use cases so that there are some key takeaways for each of these use cases. So this, you will see a pattern for each of these use cases. Let me give you a sneak peek on one of the chapters called Mergers and Acquisitions and Divestitures. This is a very interesting, a very relevant topic for today. You see in every industry, there are all these three things are happening. You talk about pharmaceutical industry, you talk of consumer products industry, you talk of oil and gas industry, every banking industry, every industry is going through this in different shape and form. But primarily what we see as a pattern is there would be a seller side and there would be a buyer side, right? It depends on who is calling you as an enterprise architect to solve their problem. The perspective would change. And then there are different phases to it. Ideally, if you see, these are the critical phases of a mergers and acquisitions. Um, there are pre-deal phases where if you are in that organization probably and then you are in the team of M&A, you would probably get involved right at the pre-deal stage, right? And then while it progresses, there are in the deal execution, depends on, is it a divestiture use case or is it a acquisition use case? Your deal execution tasks would be different. And then of course there are due diligence phase. But what we have seen from our side, from a product company or from a consulting company or SIs, most of the time we get involved in the post-deal phase, right? So there is already a TSA agreement in place, and then the use case could be that come and help us how it will look like in an acquisition case, the merged landscape, right? What are the IT impacts of merging a landscape? What are the business capability impact? How much harmonization is possible? How much difference we are in this acquisition? So those kind of things comes in the post-deal phase. Even carve-out planning or divestiture use case, there are cases where you see how do you derive the transition strategy, right? Those are some of the use cases you will see. So there is a survey by LeanIX, a little old survey, but you see almost 90% of the cases, most EAs or enterprise architects are involved in the post-deal phase and the post-merger and integration phase, right? So that's these last two boxes. So that's the business and the IT context. Now, if you look at this two use case, this is what is explained in pretty detail in the book. I just want to give you a quick glimpse. So in the divestiture use case, our experience was there are some fictitious name of the company called Spinco is decided to this no. On transition strategy to move to S4 HANA, right? Carving out from existing SAP ECC system. So how to separate IT systems. So that's the use case. Like this, both these companies or business divisions are running on the same ECC system. And now because of this divestiture, and divestiture can happen because of many reasons. So it might be a very profitable business and it might want to carve out and become an independent business. Or it could be that there are multiple divisions at some point in time they acquired and they wanted to move in same direction, but now they wanted to separate out, right? So, but it has a huge impact on the IT. That's where the transition strategy use case is explained here. The second use case is the acquisition, where again this is a typical pharma use case, and you have seen a trend that all these generic pharma companies is acquiring a business, cell and gene, which is cell therapy business process, which is very unique, and then the generic pharma business is very make to stock kind of business, that is very individualized, make to order kind of business, right? So that the whole business models are different. There are impacts on capabilities, and then this company where they acquired a company which was not in SAP, and then how to integrate that was a good exercise which we did on to arrive at the target architecture and roadmap. Now, when we applied our EA transformation approach for the use case one, which is divestiture use case, we saw these are the architectural modules which is applicable. Again, we for every use case, most of the time we understand that strategy, we understand how the strategic drivers would look like. So that's where the strategy mapping, business capability. So in this divestiture case, what is the capability which is getting carved out, right? Is it all the manufacturing and warehouse management and sales, or it includes the whole setup of the business, including finance, right? So that is very important to identify and then see which are the applications getting impacted in the target architecture. So we have as is and to be product map, which gives us a picture of how it will look like. And then they also take an opportunity that when they're carving out from ECC, for example, why to again land in ECC as a target, right? So they can straight away move to S4 HANA And that's where our SAP DMLT team comes into picture, where they have specific tools to carve out based on company code or plant or profit center, or even if it's like commingled data, there are tools which can be used to carve out. That's where the transition scenario comes in. For the use case 2, acquisition use case, as you can see, the modules have changed, because here we also need to assess a bit and understand the business process which is being impacted due to acquisition. Not only the capability which derives the target, but also the business process gives a clear segregation how different they are in terms of execution of those capabilities, which is business process, right? So that's why business process assessment also becomes important. Integration, that's very, very important, because you're acquiring a company and that could have a various different variant, right? The example which was explained in the book is they're acquiring a non-SAP company, which means their system is non-SAP, but there could be acquisition where they may use a SAP system. So there was an interesting use case also where the company who acquired another company, they were in S4HANA, and the company who acquired, they were in ECC. So it's a very interesting use case that when you come to the parent company, would you go back to ECC, or you would say that, okay, acquired, the parent company should move to S4. So that was an interesting discussion, even which came up in the recent experience. It's also important to do all the initiatives and roadmap, which means which are the programs, which are the projects which will be for this transformation, and then you derive the target architecture and roadmap to see how the 3-year roadmap would look like, how 5-year roadmap would look like, because you can't transform in just 1 year. So there will be steps to transformation. So it's important that what do you consider in the first step to build the foundation for future, and then what do you consider for step 2, which could be like optimization and standardization, and what would you consider for step 3, which probably could be innovate and grow further, right? Again, this is also not sequential, but at least we need to give that view. There are certain things which you can always prepone depending on the priority. So that's the roadmap aspect of the case. That's all I had for today. We can open up for question. If there are questions in the chat for me and Peter, we can take that.
Yeah, we can also go back to some of the slides. Okay,
Yes.
typically we try to be fast enough to have a really active dialogue, because that is for us the most important thing here, right? Because otherwise it's only canned content. There have been already 2 questions. I think the one I tried to answer, one was about decision catalog as an artifact in LeanIX inventory. So I think the decisions are currently not fact sheets in LeanIX, because LeanIX has an interesting fundamental idea of being lean, right? So even the naming of the company is LeanIX. So therefore, when inventing LeanIX, Andre Christen and his team always focuses on keeping the meta model very small and easy to understand, and therefore they didn't add decisions as an extra fact sheet, but rather than used these decision documents as documents which can link to the real fact sheets. I think it's a bit of a different concept. Okay, now we have more questions. For customer migrating from on-prem ECC to S/4HANA Cloud, e.g. brownfield migration to SAP RISE, now do you navigate the retirement or sunset of legacy SAP functional modules in NetWeaver SAP Business Suite that are now integrated with S/4HANA? What is the role of the SAP EA in advising the customer on how to resign? Yeah, I think the evolution of the landscape, that things go away, technologies goes away, functionalities go away, new functionalities come in different things. That's a kind of I wouldn't say a constant rewiring that happened in the past, but for sure with the move to S/4HANA Cloud, and particularly if you would even move to public cloud, then even further than if you would go to private cloud, I think this is part of the enterprise architect role. Maybe also a word on enterprise architects. There are so many at SAP these days, right? So maybe also a little bit of a word, because when there is a motion of SAP RISE, which is a contractual engagement model, we also provide enterprise architect for these RISE engagements in particular, right? So those are even free of charge people who give a first glimpse of advisory. They are rather, I wouldn't say high level, maybe that's the wrong content, but their delivery method is more reference based. So I think because they are part of that contract for free, they don't do your custom detailed instance strategy or your rollout strategy by geography in depth. I think those would then still be tailored services you would need, but they give you an introduction. Okay, what is a typical 2B architecture? Why is enterprise architecture as an approach the right one for you to take on? And also will explain the role of the integrated tool chain, and they care in particular about clean core fundamentals, use of AI and BTP. So there's a multiple responsibilities bundled in this RISE enterprise architect role, which are part of these contracts. But if you want to do what I think Anup described is this kind of example, then you still, and you want to have SAP advising you on that one, then you would still work with consulting groups like us. We are typically doing it in the max attention arena, but there are also possibilities to get these services from other groups in SAP.
Maybe just to add one more point here to Ron's question, that this use case also looks to be a bit of application rationalization exercise. How do you retire? How do you sunset an application? So during our study, we get the list of complete applications, SAP, non-SAP, including what capabilities they're fulfilling. And then we go to an exercise of application rationalization. So we have different disposition, and even if you use a LeanIX tool, there is a time framework or there is a 6R framework, and then customers sometimes they give us their own disposition. So that's what we arrive at to decide if this application will be retired or sunset, where you want to put money, invest, where you would be rehosting or replatforming. There are different disposition which you can use to do this exercise. I hope
Next question is also a very good one from Esteban. Customers bought LeanIX and care about applications. Okay, LeanIX has its root in, let's say, application inventory management, right? So, but I think it was intended always as an enterprise architecture tool. But yes, it came more about application rationalization, complex landscape, having an inventory, and using the other dimensions more or less only to qualify the applications, because that was the core of the DNA of LeanIX. You can see it, even the licensing model of LeanIX is only about the number of fact sheets of applications. Yes, I think so. Our recommendation when helping establishing the practice, to repeat that, is that you shouldn't start necessarily with applications. Okay, application is a foundation. Inventory you ideally get from Cloud ALM with Inventory Builder and other things, anyhow, kind of ideally recognized through scanning of your landscapes, at least for the SAP part. But I think having a proper managed capability model, which you use for the dialogue with your business, with your prioritization, and to also use that in transformations. What is the value of a transformation, etc. We believe strongly in the holistic approach of enterprise architecture, and when we see that customers only use it in a very narrow application side, we recommend to broaden it. And I think the good thing, if they already have all the applications, there's no extra cost now to expand it to capability modeling, doing strategy maps, or linking also to business processes.
I think the next question was from Catherine. How does EA share the value of SAP core to the business?
Well, I think core with clean core, I think that is I think if I read it in that direction, is the clean core is a kind of a principle, and I think that principle existed before we named it the clean core. The idea is that you do not modify or manipulate your ERP system any longer, so that you are caught in a specific release and cannot upgrade without a huge extra effort, right? So LeanIX as an enterprise architecture tool, I wouldn't argue now start documenting each and every custom ABAP object in Linux as a tool, but the fundamentals that you follow the standard and maybe classify, okay, what are the areas which are highly modified or not, and then having an explicit effort to go back to standard or revert a couple of those customization should be part of any transformation. And then ideally in an architecture work, you already have a good understanding where these appreciating of a cleaner core is valuable. When you add a clean core, then you get the benefits of upgrades being more simple. And then with the upgrades, you also get new features for an SAP, like AI built into the standard transactions available to you as well. Oh, more questions are coming in. I should not answer this.
Yes. So
Okay.
let me take this Atul's question. There are two questions he is asking. So one is, I would be interested to hear about a real life example of how an SAP enterprise architect engaged with the customer, the business, and the project team, and helped provide EA support, guidance, and advisory services. So there are multiple engagement model. So how we get engaged, so me, Peter, and our team, is in the case of where customer already has a max attention contract. And then there is a front office team who gets the request for this architecture transformation. So that could be one channel. If there is no max attention contract, I'm sure if you are using SAP, then there would be account executives, our account team. There would be our services sales executive. So they would be the first point of contact where there would be a need. Now with every RISE customers, there is also RISE Enterprise Architect. So that could be another channel where you can get engaged and get support. So yeah, there are different channels depending on the contract types and the engagement models. So there are different ways. Let me
Maybe
answer. Go ahead.
linked to that one, there's how do you perform application rationalization
Yes.
when
Yeah.
the client does not have them all documented. Also, many customers don't have LeanX, and if they're not RISE customers, they don't get it also for free. So they might have other tools, and that is perfect. We as consultants, we think for us, LeanX is our typewriter, right? So I think we don't want to go there with PowerPoint only. So even if a customer has no LeanX and is not intending to do it, we as enterprise architect consultants would still use it. And yes, for sure, we would depend on getting information on the application landscapes of the customer. So not having the entire landscape, then we cannot advise on application rationalization. So, but I think if a customer wants to do it in a different tool set, then we would need to say, okay, how can we complete it? What is the scope we care for? Maybe we only do it in the financial or HR area to have a more manageable scope. So we will always live with the imperfect world of documentation. We would encourage the customer to only take on things in their own accountability in a tool, ideally LeanX, but could be anything else as well, if they build a business case for it. So they shouldn't do it as a one-off. Sometimes you need to do a one-off to decide greenfield versus brownfield. Yes, you may throw away that analysis, but if you invest in documenting integrations and interfaces, I think this is such a strong asset, so you want to keep it. And therefore, it's important to also, again, focus on the practice of keeping the inventories up to date and using them for your daily or your quarterly planning or in any kind of transformation work. So I think that is should be part of everyone's practice. And when we even have our internal repositories of our customers and come back half a year later, we also would try to build on top of each other. Or if pre-sales would have started to work with customers and then consulting comes second, we also will try to leverage, I think, one version of the tools of a customer. What else?
I think there was one question above, Atul, from Nitin. Where was that? Yeah. How do you ensure SAP solutions effectively support and align with the organization's overall business strategy and goals?
I think this comes where the reference content comes in handy, right? Because our product engineering department, the development department, when they develop the solution, they document the strategic capabilities the solution provides. So we have, alongside with S4HANA, but also with Ariba, with all the different things, the business capabilities as a reference model. Now, when you do now a business strategy, I think there is this typical assessment, okay, what capabilities support these strategies as well? So then we have value lifecycle manager, where we have value drivers and value drivers linked to business capabilities. I would argue we are not in our current version of the reference architecture. It's not perfectly aligned yet, but I think this is the fundamental of our methodology, that through strategy, the value drivers linking to the business capabilities implemented by the solutions will make sure that you have that kind of a good match.
Okay. Yeah, there are questions keep coming. Where are we right now? Okay. I think Fred Lee, is there a demo site by industry domain that shows end-to-end of all SAP tools ecosystem?
But there is Signavio's
Signavio is there, and even Business Acceleration Hub, right? In Business
No, I think there is
Acceleration
not
Hub.
in SAP.me or me.sap.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
There is
me.sap.com, yeah.
there's a view only thing, so which you can then use for even without any licensing of Linux or Signavio. We can provide that link. Maybe I look it up.
Yeah, I think Thando Mayo, nice to see your message, Thando. I think we have met. In your view, what metrics or KPIs should measure the success of SAP enterprise architecture beyond technical outcomes? So yeah, I mean, this is very, very important question in terms of how to measure the success of enterprise architecture, right? So this is there are two thoughts to it. One, definitely when you start this enterprise architecture exercise, there are some goals which you are chasing at that point in time when you are in the planning phase, right? So there are goals of coming up with the robust target architecture, coming up with the roadmap, coming up with which applications to retire or which applications to put money on, which business capabilities is a priority, right? So those are some of the criteria which laid down in terms of the outcome as well. But this doesn't stop there, right? So we also have an internal exercise which we are doing in terms of continuous architecture evolution, right? Which means it needs to be agile. So there has to be there are customers who actually also came up with a request saying that whenever I do a budget cycle, like every 1 year or every 1.5 year, I want this architecture review should also happen, because in 1 year now the landscape changes completely, right? There are new applications coming, or that there are new business growth drivers, there are merger acquisition happened, or there are applications having end of life. So we need to have those continuous improvement of the architecture as well, or continuous monitoring of the architecture as well. That is why also this integrated toolchain concept is also very, very important, because unless you have this transparency, unless you have visibility of what are your applications when it is retiring at the trigger point, not in PPT and Excels, then I think you can still measure it, right? So
maybe very quick, because there was a question. So I'm now on this me.sap.com. Service and support. So if you go in on the left side to service and support, and then to ALM, and then you see Subsignavio Process Navigator, and here you have the reference business architecture, and then you see the different end-to-end processes. You can also even select okay and say, hey, I only want to see automotive. And then you go maybe to plan to fulfill, and then you see here all the variants which are relevant for make this scheduling agreement. And here you then see the value flows, and this is the process architecture, and then you can expand them down to the business capability, and then you see these diagrams. And in the same way, I think if I go back here, there's also business capabilities, so that you can see for all the business capabilities, let's say in the future, that is our new ones we work with. I think we work in 4 enterprise domains, again, supply, then manufacturing, and then manufacturing and engineering. Once you click, then you see the specific business capabilities. And underneath the business capabilities, you also see what solutions implement these business capabilities. And then we are on the solution capability level. So I think this is a way for the first one I showed the process view, the value flows, and here I show a capability-based entry where you also then arrive at the solution capability. I think we're coming to an end. Not sure how much time we have, Philip.
Yes, we have just hit the time limit. So perfect timing from you there, Peter. So yeah, a very big thank you.